blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? Like Mans Like You on these biting beats. What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel today, where I am going to be talking about the most exciting thing because of what happened to me in the last week. I actually encountered someone who literally tried to steal my song and release it as their own by sampling a significant chunk of that. So this video is going to be all about sampling versus beat biting, because when I confronted the individual publicly, it was interesting to me that a lot of aspiring DJs and producers, and even some seasoned ones, were like, well, how much did they sample? Did they sample 2 bars or 8 bars? Like, it made a difference. And then I realized, well, yeah, it's probably a good time to have this conversation about the difference between sampling versus beat biting and the consequences attached to the beat biting piece and where it all comes from in the background. But before I jump into things, what I need from you is that SLC. Hit subscribe, like, comment, and more importantly, hit the notifications bell to stay in touch with the new videos that we have up and coming. All right, so let's just jump right into this. I'm going to keep this brief because I do think it's important we understand the difference between sampling versus beat biting. And I'm not going to mention dude's name who tried to release my song as his own. I'll get him on the next video because it's kind of attached to this discussion, but it's going to make for a video that's too long and I don't want to do that. So tune in for that. But let's start with point 1 here. And point 1 is I'm coming from the perspective, and let's recognize that sampling is an art form. There's so many different examples of this where you can take the same sample and have 5 different producers do something completely different with it, but it's all from the same source. That is an example of sampling being an art form. Or in my case with Fool's Gold, when they asked me to do a remix of Heroes Stay the Night, they had lost all of the stems for the original project and said, well, here's the OG, remix it. And I chopped that up and made it my own. And that's an example of sampling being an art form. It's important to know the distinct differences here because I think in today's culture and environment of social media, the tendency to want things straight away and to be put on straight away without having to do any form of work, this definition of sampling versus beat biting is starting to get lost in translation completely. And I think technology has a part of that, but I'll jump into that as the video continues here. Point number 2. Now, here's the difference with beat biting. Beat biting is simply, in my opinion, record and play exactly whatever it was you sampled. You didn't do anything different to it. You didn't attempt to get creative with it. You didn't attempt to put your own influence based on the things that inspire you into the song. You just recorded and played it and then put your name on it and said, yo, this is my shit, which is beat biting. And beat biting, that's a term that comes back way back from like the hip-hop, early days of hip-hop. And from a production perspective, I know, at least for me, when I first started producing beats, I was making hip-hop at first. And it was like sacrilege to go and take a beat that was already made by another producer the same way. Even if you found the original sample, if you sampled it the same exact way and you didn't do anything really different with it, like, you were shamed publicly, and sometimes you often caught a serious beatdown for it. And on top of the beatdown that you got from it, you also didn't really have any respect at the end of the day. No one would even attempt to fuck with you if you went out and said, oh, my bad, I didn't know we can do that, or, you know, all that bullshit attached to beat biting. People just know who you are and just cut you off immediately. And that's kind of the foundation I come from. And I think it's still intact today with a lot of different producers. You know, if you spend time learning a craft and you put it together and you work it and you paid your dues, you know, you shout out dollars for different samples. And even though you can get samples easily and know where somebody caught the sample, it's still no excuse to just outright take a person's beat in its entirety and say, okay, I'm going to put my name on it and put that shit out. It's bullshit. It's whack. And point number 3 is to note the consequences of beat biting. I'm going to grab these 2 records here as an example. So way back in the day, these types of records started showing up. These beat records, you know, where it would show, you know, different beat breaks, but you'll notice there's like no titles, no source of where the beat came from, just straight drums. And most people were cool with stuff like this because you could cut it up while you're mixing and playing beats, throw an acapella on top of it, and people would be like, whoa, this is dope, you know. And then you had records like this start to show up where it fully called out the names of the samples, the songs, of the breaks. And I remember DJ Premier, who's a very well-respected hip-hop producer, I think he actually said it on one of his records, like, it's straight up violation, you're putting these records out. And he sounded really upset. Now, he was upset from a couple of perspectives. The first one being, now that you're saying, oh shit, Premier used this beat, and you have the original, and you know, whoever owns that publishing, they started going after people to clear samples and stuff. And I mean, the whole thing about sample clearance is a whole other discussion. But when you're a producer and you're not prepared to necessarily pay the sample clearance, back in the days, it was a big deal. Now, fine, you want to clear a sample, there's, you know, a whole process for that. But back then, that was a huge consequence because you ended up paying out the ass for stuff like that in some cases. The other thing that I think Premier was upset about, and it's still the thing that I harbor to this day, is the fact that when people don't actually go out and do their research, do some digging for records, figure out who some artists are and what inspired them and what came before them and the things that inspired those individuals, etc., etc., you really lose a huge opportunity to build what would be known as your own sound and what you would contribute to the culture as an artist. And I think that's probably the most upsetting thing about this today, because it's so much easier to do that research. Like way back when, the research is done in the record store. You happen to speak to somebody who knew another person that had an indie copy of whatever George Clinton wrote before he blew up, and you had to find that record. And I mean, that still goes on today, but it's easier to find out this information, you know, through sites like Discogs and things of that nature. And it's just a laziness attached to it when someone just takes your whole fucking beat and says, yeah, I'm the shit and I wrote this, when they didn't do any of that. So there's dire consequences to beat biting, and that's the foundation and background where it comes from. And point number 4 is the fact that there's no foundation to be built upon when it comes to beat biting, and you leave no legacy. There's just nothing positive about the action in terms of record and play and then put your name on it like it's your own. No one will respect that. Any efforts or, you know, cursory efforts that you made or relationships you built, once people find out about plagiarism, they often just run away from you like you're some sort of diseased thing. You're waiting to invade their space. All right, and last but not least is point number 5, which is, if you can't get your head around the difference between sampling as an art form versus beat biting, maybe it's easier to absorb this in terms of inspiration versus plagiarism. There's a lot of different artists that have and continue to inspire me. Everyone from as far as Herbie Hancock, Robert Glasper, DJ Smilk, DJ Sneak, Mark Farina, Derek Carter, and so forth. As both DJs and producers and musicians, those are people that genuinely inspire me, and I can comfortably say I bring some of that inspiration into my art. And the whole thing about inspiration is it's just really all about how does this body of work touch you, and based on my interpretation of that body of work, here's what comes out through me in terms of the songs that I release. That is inspiration. Plagiarism is just a simple copy and paste job, and there's just no intellectual learning. There's no journey attached to the artistry. Plagiarism is exactly that. It's just word for word or note for note, or basically timestamp to timestamp, and putting the record out as your own. So that's really the key difference. Whereas sampling as an art form forces you to be creative and to just do something different. You know, we've had a lot of these discussions, especially in the Jackin House world, about, oh, here we go with the Remind Me sample or Move-In sample, Brass Construction. It's like there's only so many ways you can do it, and it's probably already been done before. Time to move on, and why don't you just push the boundaries and do something else? But unfortunately, some people are even extra lazy and rather not do anything but to try and profit and benefit off of somebody else's work, which is just not cool at the end of the day. So in my next video, I'm going to show you how to combat that when it does happen to you. But for now, I hope there is some understanding from a producer and even a DJing perspective, the differences between sampling and just straight up beat biting and the consequences that are attached to it. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the topic. Would love to hear from you. I usually join the conversation within 48 hours of posting these videos, so please go ahead and comment. Let me know what you think. And the conversation doesn't have to end there. Please join our Discord server, where it's growing rapidly each and every day with a number of like-minded members, all looking forward to, expand their horizons of their craft and engage in some healthy debate on the things involving underground electronic music from time to time, as well as suggestions on different technologies and products that could help people in their production journey. So much love and respect to you. Peace.